Hey everybody, Jerry here. Sorry, we're not going to be live tonight due to some unexpected circumstances, but we will be back soon. And by we, I mean me and Oreo here. In the meantime, please enjoy these CANTV broadcasts that we're finally porting over to YouTube with some excellent, interesting guests from across our Chicagoland neighborhoods that demonstrate why Chicago is the best city in the world. Right, Oreo? Right? All right, everybody, enjoy these shows, and I will see you back again soon.
It's 106 miles to Chicago. We got a full tank of gas, half a pack of cigarettes. It's dark, and we're wearing sunglasses. Hit it.
Hello, and welcome to another CANTV edition of Chicago Corner, where we cover the stories from across our 77 neighborhoods that make Chicago the greatest city in the nation because of its neighborhoods and its people. I'm very, very excited to welcome to our show this evening Alderman Byron Sigcho-Lopez, who is one of our progressive aldermen in Chicago City Council, and I have followed your career and your service to the city, and I'm a big fan and admirer of your work. And I got to say, anybody that can trigger Mayor Lightfoot in a city council meeting has got to be doing something right. So I wanted to take your visiting us tonight as an opportunity to share a little bit more with our Chicago audience, your personal history, some of your personal story, what brought you to Chicago, and led to your service as alderperson of the 25th Ward. I understand you're originally from Ecuador, and you came to the United States for education purposes. Correct. Can you tell us a little bit about what brought you here to serve the good people of Chicago?
Well, thank you. Thank you, Jerry. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the invitation. So yeah, indeed, when I came in as a teenager at 17 years old, in circumstances that were a little outside what I would imagine even. I would never probably thought I was going to be one day an alderman. I was 17, probably didn't know what it was. But I came, as a teenager. At the time, my family, we got into a car accident. That's really what triggered that. We got stuck with bills, medical bills and all that. So we went from like a middle class family doing okay to now struggling with bills. And, so, at the time, my mom, my parents, we got through some real difficult times. And my mom just one day decided, said, look, the things are rough in the country. We had high inflation, talk about these times, I think our inflation at the time was reaching like 500%, So we have some, these neoliberal experiments. I've lived them, and I see what it does, what it do to communities. Yeah. So, Ecuador, was considered, I would say almost a colony. We have a military base of the U.S. We lost our currency. We have the U.S. dollar. So the neoliberal experiment did a lot of damage to us. A lot of the things that we see in Chicago,
as well as here in the United States.
Right. I mean, it's across the board, right? So, and I think we got to see, there's a lot more in common between people, right? And not so much between governments, right? And I think that's what I think, in my opinion, the service on public service is so critical, especially now, to make sure that people have safety nets, right? I think that for us, when I came in as a teenager, again, in these circumstances, I came in an interesting time. I was in 2001 when the 9/11 happened. I came that summer. Wow. And immigration changed completely, after that. I think the world entirely, changed after that. And I came to a small town in Tennessee, as an exchange student, and again, I ended up in a last minute trip, with, taking the little savings that my family had coming to the U.S. So in Tennessee, I arrived as a exchange student, and I was part of a program called the American Field Service that President Kennedy.
AFS.
AFS.
I At my high school, I was involved in that program. That's interesting.
There you
We host foreign students for the experience in the United States.
Exactly.
That's amazing. That's great.
And it was with the idea of service was an exchange, right? So, people travel. And I think that, it is a valuable, super valuable experience, to learn and understand each other, right? Absolutely. There's a lot to hear and learn from, different perspectives across the world, I think that, those barriers, frontiers and borders are imaginary. There's really, at the end of the day, we're human beings. And, I think international policy, what we see right now in wars and unnecessary wars, that are really about profit, about money. They're not about people or helping, keeping anyone safe, but really about those wars that are really profitable for some people, very costly for others, So when I came here to, and I see the devastation, right, of wars, what happened in Iraq, what's happening in Afghanistan, what's now happening in Gaza, what's happening in Ukraine. What we see in time after time, is really this military spending not ending, and I think that it was an interesting time to be here again in 2001 when I came here in a world that was very different. In Tennessee was very different for me. But I learned very quickly, I was a host family that really host me. I'm really forever thankful. The host mother, Carmen, who was an African American studies professor, taught me quite a bit about, the reality that we live in, right? Yeah. The injustices, right? And learning and quickly I learned, about the civil rights movements, right? About the history and, the history that we need to learn for us not to repeat it again. So for us, the concept of international solidarity, right? Because I think many people, as another immigrant, right? Chicago's, made of immigrants. So Polish immigrants, Latinx people, African immigrants. We're really such a melting pot. Chicago is one of the most diverse cities in the world and has what you said earlier, right? The hardest working people in the country, right? So many hardworking people. And again, when I migrated here was because the family in Tennessee had roots here. In Chicago. So I visited first time in 2001 and I was forever in love, with what I saw. In fact, when I graduated from college, that's the first stop that I made. I put back my bags, at the time, the economy in Tennessee was very different, and, remember 2006 when I came to Chicago and, I always saw, the opportunity for immigrants, communities like I represent now, like Pilsen, Chinatown, that have been the port of entry for immigrants like me for generations. And to see, the community that embraces us and sees the humanity on us, right? That is something that I think in these times is being lost, right? We see the dehumanization of immigrant communities, Black communities, you name it, and, at the core of it, I think that we need to start looking at at each other with that human face, right? We're all human beings. And I think that's what really brought me to politics, when we saw like the closing of schools and the Rahm Emanuel, right?
Oh, yeah. And mental health clinics.
The mental health clinics. These neoliberal experiments, right? Again, I grew up in a poor country, we've seen the devastation, when, the big corporations and the banking industry, takes away from the poor, the devastation it creates. Here in Chicago, I've seen the same thing.
And redistributes to the rich.
Oh, yeah. Oh, the rich never lose. Look at,
never. They're the ones getting all the socialism. They're the ones getting all the corporate handouts while, everyone else who needs some kind of a safety net is pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Well,
Absolutely.
You need to have boots first. And when you're giving all the boots to all of the elites, it makes it a little bit difficult for the hardworking person to scratch ahead,
Absolutely. Look, in terms like immigrant communities like Pilsen or Chinatown or, we have, the 25th ward in a way is a microcosm of the city, right? Because we represent the West Loop, South Loop, Abla Homes, which is a very strong enclave of the African American community in Chicago, that is being gentrified as well, right? We have big developers, taking over, entire neighborhoods, blocks, and, that we cannot accept that as the norm because it takes away the very essence. You mentioned, right? I think the show does, highlights the neighborhoods, the 77 neighborhoods, and the beauty that we have in our communities is something that we must treasure and value. Developers, corporations don't see that. They just see dollar signs. We see people, right? We see the safety nets. We see the value, right? That is oftentimes commodified, right? By developers and those corporations. And when we see the inequities and those safety nets being taken away, we got to see the suffering, right? When they close the 50 schools, right? People talk about violence, but, we're forgetting about the 50 schools that Rahm Emanuel closed.
Yeah.
I think that's at the core
We're
of a lot
still
of.
reeling from all of that.
We're reeling
And-
that.
and-
The mental health clinics that you mentioned.
And the focus has to be more on uniting. I mean, we're the most hyper-segregated city in the world, unfortunately.
Yep.
And, different neighborhoods, great, representing different cultures, but I almost feel like those in power work at keeping people divided as opposed to what you're talking about and what we like to see, uniting people against the neoliberal agenda, against the neoliberal forces that aren't really helping or providing the type of support for the hardworking citizens of the city.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we see a city, like you said, it's socialism for the rich, and it works very well.
Yeah.
And austerity for the poor, right? So,
Well, let me interrupt you really quickly. We're seeing this with the casino that we have money for, but money not for the mental health clinics. We're going to be bringing NASCAR, and we'll talk about all this. NASCAR, we've got money, they're going to pay a pittance for those licenses without getting any feedback from the community.
Absolutely.
There's the danger of a lot of local businesses being damaged by the casino and by these new industries. Lightfoot was overseas courting fintech companies to bring all this money to Chicago, right? To support tourism. But suddenly when we ask, where's the money to invest in our neighborhoods? We're broke. We know we're not broke.
Right.
But this is the heart of the problem, the neoliberal experiment or the neoliberal, what do we call it? Not experiment, but agenda, plan.
It is, the new liberals, right? The neoliberals, right?
Can you explain really quickly for our audience? Let's talk about what neoliberalism is, just as brief as we can, so we understand how that frames what we're talking about.
And I think the neoliberal experiment, I would say, because these are experiments that are conceptualized as theoretical frameworks that are absolute truths, right? And very rarely get challenged. But look at, the perfect example of neoliberalism, and one of the probably going to be one of the biggest scams in history when the whole Wall Street gets bailed out in 2009.
Yes.
Right? 2008. There's got to be the biggest transfer of wealth, from working people to the banks.
We also saw it during COVID.
And during COVID, we see
Yeah.
it. So these are the experiments that happen oftentimes that get rationalized. So neoliberalism, brings
Jobs will trickle down.
the trickle-down economics.
We give money to the corporations and the businesses to stay a business and stay afloat. Ultimately, they'll start hiring people and it'll help. And since Reagan, that hasn't worked. And what's interesting to me too is this neoliberalism, I believe, started with Reagan and Thatcher and has been embraced by the Democrats. It came from Republicans.
Right.
The Democrats now, they're Republicans they're Republicans in Democrats' clothing, the way that I see it. I see so many Democrats. I think our current Democrats are those that wanted to avoid the extreme religious conservative wackos of the Republican Party, but wanted to embrace business and all of those policies that are still going to line their pockets from their donors and serve their business interests while everybody else gets screwed, sadly.
Absolutely. And look at this trickle-down economics. You mentioned Mayor Lightfoot, right? They believe in this trickle-down. Let's invest in downtown, and because downtown is going to be doing well, it will trickle down to the neighborhoods.
It never does.
It never does. I mean, these are theories that there's a failed experiments, and we got to start talking about that. These models have never worked. I tell you, it's difficult for someone like Mayor Lightfoot or Rahm Emanuel and all these, different spectrums of neoliberals to persuade people who have lived through and endured the sufferings of neoliberal experiments when vast amount of wealth that transfer from poor or working class communities to rich, and whole industries, corporations, you name it, Wall Street, for instance, right? So this model of trickle-down economics simply doesn't work. In fact, when you mentioned, right, when it comes about casinos, when it talks about giving corporations tax incentives, tax breaks, there's always money. There's always money, all sorts of money.
Or trying to keep the Bears at Soldier Field.
Right. A $2 billion giveaway, right, to just keep
like
them.
the McCaskies don't have any money.
Exactly. So and that is actually when they demonize socialism. I'm not socialist. I think probably one of the few socialist alderpersons in the council. And when we look at socialism and what socialism actually is, we talk about social security. We talk about the safety nets that we have in terms of
socialism.
Public education, right?
The police department, the fire department.
These are public safety nets.
These are social, we often, too many Americans don't travel to recognize how socialism works in other countries like Canada,
right?
Like France, like very, very wealthy and affluent areas of the EU. And it always comes down to everybody complaining about Medicare for all or saying that, that I think that we're indoctrinated with this for-profit healthcare system, which is a whole other subject we can talk about. But it's always accused of being socialism, and socialism is always equal to communism. And it's no, there's socialistic democracies,
right.
and that's where people who have been indoctrinated can't understand that they're separate, and they're already serving us in good ways. Unfortunately, neoliberals and Republicans and conservatives are trying to take more of that away from the common person and give it more to the corporations and the ruling elites.
Look, if someone say, for people to understand, someone like Bernie Sanders, right, and maybe in Europe, we'll consider moderate, right?
Yeah.
And here he's considered a radical that must be taken down from office, right? Same thing we see in city council, right? The demonization of socialists and that we are the center of all the problems when have we adopted any of the policies that we have proposed, right? And I think that when we look at the local economy, there's tons of opportunities for us to actually have sustainable, good economies that work for the many and not the few. And I think that that's what is important to make sure that we understand the value of our communities, right? Yeah. And that we don't give it away, right? Or allow others to sell it to the highest bidder.
And address the imbalances
and
that they constantly ignore.
Absolutely. Look, by investing in our local economy and allowing to grow, we see, for instance, communities like Chinatown. I represent the 25th ward. We are the only Chinatown in the country that's growing. And let's look at where we came from and where we are now, right? The Chinatown was at the center of the indictment process when my predecessor was involved, trying to sell a parking lot to a developer. We would have killed the whole Chinatown area. Yeah. That's unfortunately the fate that many Chinatowns across the country, right, have faced. And I feel it's important to know the alternative. Look, when we have communities that are thriving and doing well, we have small businesses who are really the backbone of the economy. Talk about the people who really pay their workers well, who have, they keep growing, and I think will invest locally. We got to look at the difference between investing on small businesses versus the big corporations, and the difference of that and the biggest opportunities. Look at Amazon, the level of exploitation that.
Well, you can also see in the gentrification, the character of our neighborhoods are lost.
Absolutely, right.
To all of the corporatization and the franchises that suddenly put out the smaller businesses that have built these neighborhoods.
Yeah, and it's part of that neoliberal experiment of exploiting the working people for the extraction of wealth for
less
the benefit
than a living wage.
Less than living wage. Right now we look at with inflation, with the cost of housing, and some of the cost of gas, you name it. And I think that this is the time, but we need to rethink and transform. We clearly see how capitalism and neoliberalism are in crisis. It is not sustainable to continue to subsidize the rich and subsidize corporations at this level. Some of these billionaires are more interested in going to Mars than actually look at the issues that we live.
Can you imagine the ego related to, I want to look at Mars instead of, do you know how many people would worship you if you used your billions to eliminate homelessness? Feed everybody.
Absolutely.
Right? It's mind-boggling, the disconnect. But when they've got that much money, they're not living or suffering the lives that other people are dealing with.
Exactly. And that's what we cannot allow these billionaires and corporations, because they are running government. No doubt about it. We see between the two parties, the Republican and the Democratic Party, they both failed entirely to really address the issues at hand. Medicare for all is something that is entirely, it's a no-brainer, it's possible. It can be, easily paid for.
But the pharmaceutical companies, the pharmaceutical cartel and the insurance companies it's going to cut them off.
Exactly. So these big industries that take over government.
Yeah.
There's lobbyists. The level of lobbying and the power that these corporations have reached, despicable levels, right? When, the price of insulin, the price of basic medication is obscene. It's
the corporate states of America. Because our representation, we don't have representation. All of the corporations have the representation because they're paying the lobbyists all the money to influence our lawmakers and our representatives. I don't call them our leaders because they're supposed to represent us, but they feel that they're leaders, and they're not leading. They're only representing the people who are paying them off. It's payoffs. It's legal payoffs. Is what it is.
Bribery.
Legalized bribery.
Look. For instance, I think for something that and I guess the ethics package that the mayor ended up watering down even further. Had basic provisions, right? For instance, to address the issue of subcontractors, namely the casino contracts.
Right, of course.
To make sure that we start, cutting the incentives for corruption, right? The bribery schemes that are being legalized, right? Campaign contributions, that completely have conflict of interest, right? Look, the tragedy of all, I mean, when it comes about the casino vote, right? The city of Chicago chooses the casino operator that has the biggest trouble. I mean, we look at it, the ethics concerns, and even later on, a few weeks after that, Wall Street publishes that Bally's is having some issues of, financial.
But their down payment helped cover, what was it, some of the, what was the down payment? I saw a week later after they made their down payment, it was going towards the, it goes to the pension funds.
The pension funds,
the
right.
pension funds,
So, and again, when they sell this idea about, we have to do this for the pensions and all that, first of all, we should never put our pensions connected, with a predatory industry to begin with.
Of course not.
And the projections and all that, because at the end of the day, you ended up with predatory practices.
And the crime that's going to come from the casino.
I mean, common sense. But when you have those already red flags coming in, right? And we know that this industry, and again, we were asking basic questions. That's what we listened to our constituents in the 25th ward. This was actually going to happen in the 78 side, with Related had an application, and it was almost moving that way. But we listened to our constituents. 8 out of 10, 80% of the subjects said we do not want it.
And the mayor's tone deaf to it. You're there to represent the people in your ward, present their concerns, to which Mayor Lightfoot is completely tone deaf and ignores it because she's a dictator.
Right, no.
I mean, she rules like a monarchy. And this is the big, I mean, we've been talking about this on our YouTube show for the past year. I mean, I admit I voted for her because she bamboozled a lot of us. She ran as a progressive and a reformer, and suddenly she showed her neoliberal colors. She was a chameleon. She will say everything and stand for nothing, as I also like to say about Kamala Harris. But yeah, I mean, it's tragic because it's in the case of, like, I know this isn't your word, but NASCAR, she didn't consult with any of the alder people. And how it's going to impact not only businesses, but just living, cars flying around.
Right. I mean,
they're
talking about that this
residential area.
Right. They're going to talk about take over the Grand Park for several days. During
July 4th.
During July 4th, that they're going to bring, I think a crowd that they say comparable to what Lollapalooza brings. So, I mean, talking about the need to make sure that we coordinate those efforts, right? And make sure that, and the same thing with the casino. We have a responsibility. Mayor Lightfoot talks about fiduciary responsibility all the time.
Yeah.
But when it comes to actually practicing that,
no. And then we don't have any money. All the money that's coming in from Lollapalooza and everything else, but we can't reopen the mental health clinics. We can't invest in youth centers, as another activist, Jamal Green, has been lobbying forever. He's got some good ideas about being able to invest in youth centers to provide a diversion for kids who unfortunately don't have a familial structure. Yep. Because it's a cycle of generational poverty. It's like you don't have parents that know better to be able to divert them into better. So great, we have to take some responsibility in investing in the communities and hopefully also providing other opportunities for kids where they don't see it, to keep them away from the lure of potential gang life or anything else.
The best way we know that, all the research indicates that early interventions, investments in schools, investing in early childhood, investment in programming in our school districts, programming in park districts works. Mental health services. Look, right now in Laurel Hospital, up to, maybe hopefully has improved, but a few months ago, the waiting list for an appointment for a mental health service, critical mental health service, was 9 months. 9 months.
I think mental health is at the heart of how you start to preemptively prevent crime.
Absolutely. Look,
right? Because if you're able to provide that in communities, so much of what we see with crime, and I think mental health is also, unfortunately, it's something that people don't want to talk about. It's like a shameful thing. And it's like, no, you provide mental health services for everybody, you're going to have a much better society. So when you had people like Emmanuel shut down the clinics and we don't have any funding to reopen them or add more, but we're throwing more money at the police.
Mm-hmm. That's going to solve our
hiring more police, arresting more people. It's like there'd be less people to arrest if you started. Not defunding the police does not mean anarchy and eliminate the police. It means redivert funds. And I hope a lot of people understand that, because defund the police was a really bad term to use. It's more like, let's allocate resources better than just throwing it all at the police, because we have a very, very reactive society in Chicago when it comes to fighting crime. Mm-hmm. And it's like, if you create solutions preemptively, hopefully you won't have as many criminals or as many desperate people attracted by that.
Look, Mayor Lightfoot understands very well. I mean, she did a whole poverty summit, right? When she talked about all these strategies, things that we need to do. We have solutions in terms of, housing stability, right? Which is a big problem in the city. Yeah. Homeless has reached, tragic levels,
It's an epidemic.
It's an epidemic.
Everywhere you go.
And then look, do we want to end up with what's going on in the West Coast, what's happening in other
close,
cities?
though.
I think we're close.
close.
So,
Sad.
and this is the time, because look, in the 25th Ward, what we have done is not being shy away or actually implement the policy that works. So that's what we bought. I mean, we bought one of the largest sites for affordable housing on 18th and Peoria, a site that was almost a certainty to go for luxury housing. There was a legal challenge. We took it on. We did our due diligence, and we ended up settling so that we can buy the lots and not develop 500 or perhaps, or I don't know, 400 to 400 plus affordable housing units. So public investment can work, and does work. That's stiff dollars used now to create the housing that we need. We need to invest in mental health clinics. There's no doubt about that. Investing in public services will yield better results than what we have right now. Preemptively investing in public health in our schools. But, we have moved in the opposite direction. Look at the tragedy with the federal funding, the billions of dollars that we receive from the federal government. Some of them even not accounted for. A lot of money, was allocated for police overtime and other, and other expenses that now, after the fact, shown to have not shown the results that they were projected. So I think that we live in a time where we actually we cannot follow this narrative where the parties, both parties who serve capitalist interest, and this narrative of corporations and billionaires to basically take us away from government. The government is a failure. The government doesn't work or doesn't or is not useful. But those are the safety nets that we have, and representation does matter. In fact, I think a lesson from the 60s is that representation matters, but it's not enough. Yeah. We not only need representatives, right, that are there to help us, but I think it's critical that we have also organization outside of the electoral politics. Again, not only elected officials, but also we need institutions that work for the creation of these safety nets. I think that there's not enough participation. I think that the last election, the 17% turnout, is an indictment on the system.
Absolutely.
That people are saying this is not only enough, but this is not acceptable. So I think that we're starting to reach this level. The concern, though, with that is that this opens the gate to right-wing extremism.
Yeah.
Because they're being polarized to come out and vote. So I think that this is the time, for action.
There is so much more I wanted to talk to you about, because I know we've basically analyzed a big part of the problems, and I think we've kind of touched upon the solutions. Perhaps we can have you back again in the future to talk more about solutions, because I think that this is such a larger conversation to unwrap that we can't unfortunately cover in just 27 minutes. And also I wanted to ask you a little more about your personal life, but as an older person, but hopefully we'll get to that in the future. In the meantime, I want to thank you so much for joining us. I want to thank our audience for joining us here on our CANTV edition of Chicago Corner. You can always find us at Chicago Corner on YouTube. Please tune into our show there. Hopefully we'll also have the Alderman there to speak more on the issues as we go into the next electoral season. And remember, if it's happening on the streets, you'll hear about it here on Chicago Corner. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent. If you would like to be a guest on Chicago Corner, please email our host, Jerry, at chicagocorner.tv.
Hello, Chicago. Welcome to another CANTV episode of Chicago Corner, where we cover the news across the 50 wards in Chicago that make it the best city in the world. Short of the violence that we're trying to contend with here in the city. I want to welcome you all to I believe this is our 5th episode of Chicago Corner here on CANTV. And joining us this broadcast, as well as covering news that is in the Chicago area, we also cover news that comes across the state of Illinois that impacts Chicago. And we have with us tonight from Defy Ventures, Melissa Odell.
Hi, Jerry.
Hello. Who's the executive director of Defy Ventures, which is a nationwide organization that just came to our attention by virtue of inviting you onto the show. Thank you for sharing with us what Defy does. This is, I think, a very, very exciting conversation we're going to have, because so often on Chicago Corner, we talk about the city of Chicago's reaction to violent crime, right? We don't always want to complain about the problems, we want to find the solutions. What Defy Ventures does, not only here in the state of Illinois, which also affects Chicago and safety nationwide, is they offer programs for prisoners getting out of prison to have an easier chance at getting a job, getting a second chance, as well as building their own businesses. And as we know, so much of crime is not violent. It's not always violent crimes. And a lot of nonviolent offenders are not being given the second chance that they deserve to become valuable members of society who recognize and have already, done the time for whatever it was that they were put into prison for, and want to make amends and actually do something better with their lives and also give back to the community. This speaks to, it's a good reactionary response to the fact that sadly a lot of people who might be charged with crimes that go into prison don't have the opportunities that might lead them astray to making a bad choice, which puts them into prison, right? So if they don't have the opportunities or the investment in their communities to avoid some bad choices, this offers them the opportunity, once they're out of prison after they've served their time, to become valuable members contributing to society again. And this is what Defy Ventures does. And Melissa, I want to kind of hand it over to you. I want to ask you, I understand that Defy Ventures, I guess, was founded in 2010. It started in New York?
Yeah, sure. And well, thank you again for having me. Really
Sure.
excited to be here. Defy Ventures began in New York, and it was really focused mainly on providing support to people who were already back home in the community, and they were seeing that there were a lot of impediments to starting up their own business. So it was very much focused on people who were already home, but still feeling the collateral consequences of their prior conviction and a lot of barriers and stigma that they were facing. I actually got involved with the program. I've been with Defy for 7 years, and I started in California when Defy had gotten a Google Impact Challenge grant to expand its operations from the East Coast to the West Coast.
So now Defy actually is able to provide guidance and programs to prisoners who are still incarcerated before they get out, so at least they can kind of come up with a plan,
Right.
or have a path to entrepreneurship or being judged fairly for job opportunities that they should be afforded when they are released from prison.
Absolutely. So today, Defy is all about providing pathways to financial independence for people who are currently and formerly incarcerated. So we're in 7 states throughout the country. We operate in 16 state prisons. Here in Illinois, where I'm the executive director of our chapter of the national organization, we're in 3 state institutions. We're in 2 men's facilities and 1 that serves women. We also have a whole host of support for people as they come home in the community. And we also realize that there are people who maybe they never got to take our program while they were inside here in Illinois, but they could still benefit from Defy's program. So we have a lot of free entrepreneurship services for folks who maybe they were detained at the county jail. Maybe they're still on some supervision of some sort. But we feel that wherever they are in the continuum, there are opportunities to connect people to meaningful work, and that gives people purpose. And as you were saying, that gives them an opportunity for a second chance.
This is a very visionary program. As you mentioned, it began in New York in 2010. So the founders of the company, certainly there has to be some capital invested in this. Is it a nonprofit, or can you talk about the structure of it and how the founders were able to find the resources to really convince people, look, stop looking at prisoners as an impediment on society, especially in cases of nonviolent offenders. Right? And the prison system is so privatized now that it's almost like there's more incentive to throw more money at police to put people in prison than recognize this is not a violent crime. I mean, to even like keep them out of prison if it's a nonviolent crime. But those that unfortunately do are expected to do the time for a nonviolent crime. There's a stigma when they come out, and we kind of have to get past that and look past the fact that there are people that make mistakes, and those that are able to learn from them, reform themselves, recognize. Sadly, a lot of nonviolent crime choices are not, I want to go be a criminal. It's there are a lot of hard choices in a lot of neighborhoods, especially across the city. We talk about in Chicago corner the fact that a lot of kids that get involved in gangs or violence or crimes, they're growing up in families where parents didn't have an example before them. It's it's a generational cycle of when some people are in poverty, when there is an investment in the communities to provide job opportunities, distract kids with youth centers where they can actually learn what their talents and their potential is, more investment in mental health clinics. A lot of people who live in other neighborhoods that aren't as unfortunate don't realize that these sometimes do come down to bad choice. You know what? Before we continue, I want to be able to share a video with our audience that spotlights many of the members who've come out of the program successfully and share what their experience is that Defy offers them the opportunity with
Great.
through their organization. So let's take a look at the clip.
I missed years. I wasn't there for those moments when my sons needed me, when my daughters needed me, when my wife was struggling, going through challenges. I wasn't there.
The day I saw my mom, she looked at me, she goes, you know what? I can die now because I know you're home.
Hopefully other incarcerated peoples can see that we are, good for second chances, that we're able to succeed.
The most important thing that I learned is that it is not true that everyone in society hates us who have made mistakes in life.
I'm doing this for my mother because I took her for granted when I was younger. I always argued with her, and she stayed steady, like supporting me in my incarceration.
So my goal in life now is to be a contributing member to society and just living that authentic lifestyle.
The volunteers are everything to me. They make you feel like a human being when you know everyone else doesn't.
I'm happy. And I think at the end of the day, that's what we all strive to be, just happy.
It took some years to understand when the grown-ups used to tell me I can do anything I can put my mind to. And taking that, I'm running with it.
And that's my goal in life, just to be a regular guy and live life to the fullest.
I'm doing this for my family. After being in prison for 10 years, actually I'm matured and I got this.
I'm doing this for the guys that are left behind. Carry the message of the men inside out, like, there's an opportunity for redemption and change, even if society's already written us off.
It's quite powerful.
Yeah.
When you see the benefits of giving people a second chance. I'd like for you to share with us the different programs and pathways that are offered to participants of the program before they are released, and kind of walk us through how do people that are incarcerated prior to their release know about what Defy offers, the program? I guess take us through the steps of like how you, I guess for lack of a better word, promote it amongst those that are incarcerated to know that there's that opportunity. You're giving them a chance and a pathway once they're released.
Sure. So first, it's great to be able to just see that video and to hear your thoughts on it. Several of the people featured in that video are personal friends now, and they've accomplished so much. So how we, build our program, first and foremost, starts with getting buy-in from the State Department of Corrections. So here in Illinois, we are able to partner with correctional folks who allow us to come inside their facilities and start offering the program, which is a huge benefit because there are some systems that are perhaps resistant to rehabilitative programming, but we're really fortunate that we're able to serve here. So we have a proprietary curriculum. It's called CEO of Your New Life, and that is the program that the individuals you saw in the video got to take. It's a 6 to 9 month program, and it focuses on employment readiness, personal development and well-being, and entrepreneurship, as well as just how to change thinking, and which ultimately changes behavior, because it's not just a class to teach you how to get a job. It's not just a class to teach you about business. It actually is more holistic. We look at the 5 keys to reentry well-being. What's going to help people actually thrive when they come home, not just survive. So it's a really extensive program that lets people start to see themselves in a new light, not as just a number, not as a word like offender or prisoner, but rather as a human being. We're still all human beings, regardless of what choices we've made. And as you stated, there are also circumstances, often systemic circumstances. We know that there is intense racial and social injustice that goes into our legal system. And people often say that the system works how it was designed to. It tends to lock up brown and black folks from marginalized communities. Here in our city of Chicago, 54% of people who are incarcerated at the state level go back to 7 or 8 neighborhoods on the south and west sides. So we have to think about that as a community. Most people who are going inside come back, and they're our neighbors. They become our friends, or they are our friends. They are our family members. They are members of the overall community. And how do we want to welcome them back? Do we want them to go back to the same circumstances that they went in? Or do we want to give them new opportunities, new skill sets? And I think the other piece about Defy that's really special is our community of support. That's like our secret sauce. We bring in business executives to do coaching and mentorship while people are in CEO of Your New Life.
Well, this also lowers the am I pronouncing recidivist rate correctly?
Mm-hmm.
So talk about that, because I was looking at the numbers and I was like really impressed. Was it less than
10%?
Less than 10%.
Yeah.
Yeah, recidivism now as a result of the benefits of this program.
Right. That's right. Yes, we've seen that, across the board, nationally, graduates of the CEO of Your New Life program, 1 year post-release, are not going back to jail or prison on a new conviction or a revocation of any kind for their parole, et cetera, at a rate of less than 10%. And if you look at national numbers, I mean, you can see anything from 30 to 50% of people returning when there are no interventions of this nature. So you think about it from a business standpoint. If you had a business that was failing at almost 50% of the time, would you want that business to continue to go forward? Would you want to invest in that? Or think about it from the perspective of Defy, where, across the board, where we all program, it's about $77,000 to incarcerate someone per year,
crazy,
right?
Crazy.
To serve in Defy's programs, it's only about $2,500 a person to give them all of this education, this access to a really robust curriculum, and a feeling of self-worth and self-efficacy. And then when people come home, we provide that bridge. We don't just stop doing our work when they're inside. They come home, we continue to give them mentorship. We give every graduate a Chromebook. We do digital upskilling. We give them access to, food, fellowship, and fun as well, giving them a sense of community. And then for some people who do desire to start their own business, we have a whole host of business acceleration components that we offer as well. Again, and all of this is free to our participants. We're a nonprofit, so we raise philanthropic dollars from the community, from foundations, governmental sources, all in service of being able to really meet people where they're at and give them what they need to thrive.
So you mentioned entrepreneurship. There are 2 pathways. There's the pathway of training and job training so that people can find work. Then there's the path to entrepreneurship. Let's talk first about the first path, which is helping place people with jobs.
Yeah.
How does Defy reach out or make the connections within the workplace community that might be a little adverse because of a member's prior history to really help alleviate the fears that they should be given a second chance, and these are valuable, worthwhile people that should be looked at as being valuable and for lack of a better phrase, forgiven, because they are trying to take a pathway to a newer, better life, better choices.
Sure. I mean, I think that the first thing that we start with when we're talking with hiring managers is to reflect on the notion, would any of us want to be defined by the worst thing we've ever done? And that there are many people, myself included, we've all made mistakes, and, we've gotten grace for a second chance. And one of the major inoculants to people going back inside or committing more offenses is, as I said it before, having a sense of purpose. And being connected to meaningful work is actually one of the best ways that we can increase public safety in our community. I mean, the research actually does show that. You were talking earlier about gun and gang violence in the city. and actually having viable job training programs and a conduit to real employment, real opportunities that are career trajectory, not just like, well, I don't want to do this work, so let's give it to somebody who was previously incarcerated, right? I'm not talking about that, but real work that like gives people access to sustainable living wages. That's the kind of employment partners that we develop. So we develop those relationships on a national level, and we also develop them locally. So I go out into the community a lot, and I meet with business leaders, and I talk to them about, well, what are your pain points? And certainly right now, one of the major issues is that, they're looking for a great workforce. And we say we have untapped talent. We have people who have amazing skill sets and are hungry to work. And so how can we build a partnership, but do that in such a way that is really supportive and understanding of where people have been coming from? Because certainly, there are challenges that people are facing in their reentry that maybe hiring managers are not aware of. Maybe they've never dealt with probation or parole before. And what does that look like? But that's where Defy, I think, comes in, and we are kind of the intermediary or the translator, right? And we help provide a safe landing for the people when they're coming home, but also help support our employment partners to say, you're going to get great talent. And people who've gone through, I would argue, a 6 or 8 month job interview, they're getting a lot of skills by going through Defy. And we're kind of vetting people for you in many respects and demonstrating to you that they actually have the chops to do this work. We're not saying to give a handout in any way. We're saying give people a fair shake. Yeah, absolutely. And I think another thing is that we partner with an academic institution, the Drucker School of Management out of Claremont Graduate University has taken a look at our curriculum, and everybody who actually completes it and passes a final exam gets a certificate of entrepreneurship, which is a credential they can put on their resume. So it's demonstrating to employers that people deserve an opportunity to show you what they have. And many people inside are extremely entrepreneurial, and they become intrapreneurs. They can really do a lot for your company if you give them an opportunity.
Despite the fact some people might say it's stupid to commit a crime, smart people commit crimes when they make that choice. So
for sure.
If you can redirect the intelligence of people into something more valuable and worthwhile, let me ask you a question. So I would imagine that there are some businesses that might be resistant to the idea of hiring, giving opportunities to people who are, have a record. How do you help guide them past that resistance to recognizing that you've got valuable, that you've got valuable talent. That can help their businesses.
Well, I think that, we do that really by getting people proximate. So that means that we invite companies, the C-suite, hiring managers, we invite business executives to come inside and meet the folks in our program. So rather than me just telling you stories or showing you a video, I invite all your viewers too, to check out Defy and come and volunteer with us for a day. It will change your mind. It will shift the perceptions that you have about those who've been impacted by the legal system in immeasurable ways, because you'll start to see that there's a lot more similarities between all of us than differences. And so we host business coaching days, and we actually run Shark Tank style competitions inside prison as well, which are pretty phenomenal. And we do empathy building exercises. So we start that process while people are still inside. And then we do the volunteerism and mentorship also when people come home. And I think that by people telling their stories, I mean, that's what this is right now, right? Yeah. We're sharing an opportunity to get to know one another. That's when the humanity gets there. I think that's when a lot of those preconceived notions can be broke down. And then I would also say that we run fair chance hiring workshops and reentry simulations as well for companies, so we can help them think through their hiring practices. Sometimes they've never even evaluated why do they have a particular rule that they do have about somebody who has a background. And, that I think interrogating those things that maybe were just on your desk when you first showed up is really important.
I would imagine there's also a therapeutic mental health component to preparing people for these opportunities to recognize and basically reaffirm or recapture their self-worth.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and that's why I said, our work is evidence informed. We have taken a look at the canon of what works in reducing recidivism. And I would say about 60 to 70% of our content in our curriculum is that personal development and wellness piece, right? So we're thinking about how to create positive social relationships and positive coping strategies, how to increase self-efficacy, again, how for people to reclaim who they are in the world and not be only stigmatized or thought about as the conviction on their record. And I think that we really have to also take a look at the fact that there are many people you mentioned that have committed nonviolent offenses, particularly nonviolent drug offenses. And we have seen society has changed, laws have changed, and there are people inside that are still doing time for things that there are entrepreneurs in this community right now that are making pretty significant amounts of money. So we have to think about, where are we as a community and what are our values? And I think we all know that we tend to show our resources, our money, our time, our effort in the value of what we think is right and fair, but then that can also shift, right? Like we'll kind of put all that, in one aspect of like, oh, well, these group of people deserve all these things, right? But then, I think that it doesn't really allow for us to always deal with the things that come up for who we are. We have to really, we do an exercise called Step to the Line. So we really have to think about what are our values? Who are we? How do we want to show up? How would we want to be treated? How would we want our family members to be treated? Sure. And that, I think, kind of moves things forward too when hiring managers.
In the 5 minutes we've got left in the broadcast, I just want to make sure I cover two other points that I think are important. First, just so we can kind of keep track of how much time I can have you speak to both.
Sure.
You also offer the pathway to entrepreneurship.
Right.
Also, I want to find out how can our viewers, how can the community get involved in what Defy Ventures offers to participate, attend the events that you're talking about now. So if they're looking for a great, strong workforce that they weren't aware of, that they can give people an opportunity that need it, how they can find you guys and be involved in that process.
Sure. So first and foremost, yes, we have a whole entrepreneurship pathway. So when people come home and they have been stabilized in their reentry, if they still desire to start up a small business, they can join our free business accelerator. So we give people access to their own executive mentor and higher level entrepreneurial content. And ultimately, if they have a viable, scalable business idea, they can pitch for funding from Defy. So again, we raise philanthropic dollars, which we then work to deploy to our entrepreneurs. We also have a free entrepreneurship boot camp. We're recruiting right now for it. So if there's any community member who's been impacted by the legal system, who's 18 and over, you can apply. Again, this is a free program. It's actually even online. So we try to make it super accessible for people to take. And so it's a 14-week program. At the end of that program, they have the opportunity again to get that credential that I mentioned from the Drucker School of Management. We do coaching. So along that program, they get 3 coaching days with our volunteers from the community. So sometimes in the business world, you pay a lot of money, right, for somebody to give you advice. Sure. And this is, again, all free. And then ultimately, they can, again, be part of that business accelerator and pitch for funding. So we run 2 entrepreneurship boot camps per year. The class that we're recruiting for right now starts on August 2nd.
How can employers find Defy Ventures? Also share the website or talk about what is the process for potential employers to get involved in the programs that you offer to make that connection for people? Yeah, so we're always looking for corporate partners. So there are, employee resource groups. There are HR departments can contact Defy. If you're looking for talent, we would love to connect with you to see if there are ways that we can create hiring events specifically for our graduates to come and learn about the opportunities that you might have at your company. We would also invite you to come in. We're running business coaching days and those Shark Tank style competitions I mentioned at the institutions right now. For example, we're having one at the Logan Correctional Center, which is a facility that serves women. And we're going to be having this event on August 30th. We're looking for volunteers who, if you've ever wanted to be the Mark Cuban for a day, come with us and you can, get that opportunity to hear really great business ideas. So get proximate, learn about what we do, meet our folks, hear their stories, and, put your dollars, put your time, put your resources into something that can make a difference in shifting the narrative. Employers, businesses, give people a second chance. I really encourage everybody watching this broadcast If you have a business, are looking for workers, new employees, this is a great talent and labor and workforce to potentially recruit from. And I think it really will make a difference, especially in the longer, broader implications of giving people another chance that might not have the opportunities, that you don't want people to drift back into bad habits or bad choices that, are at the heart of everything we're trying to help fix and prevent, and giving people opportunities and jobs and creating a better community for all of us. So, Melissa, listen, I want to thank you for joining us today. To everybody watching, please tune in to us on YouTube at Chicago Corner. We broadcast Tuesdays and Friday nights live, and you can participate in the live chat. Join us on the show, and remember, if it's happening on the streets, you'll hear about it here on Chicago Corner. Thanks for joining us.
The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent. If you would like to be a guest on Chicago Corner, please email our host, Jerry, at chicagocorner.tv.
Hey there, Chicago. Thanks for returning and joining us for another edition of CANTV's Chicago Corner. I'm with Dalilah Martinez this evening, who represents the group here in Chicago, the muralmovement.org. And the muralmovement.org helps coordinate, organize, and represent artists throughout the city who share their mural art in neighborhoods all wards of the city, I believe.
Yes, that's correct.
So this is a national organization that I believe started here in Chicago.
That's correct.
And Delilah, why don't you tell us a little bit about how the group started here in Chicago, what need that you saw needed serving. And then I want to be able to share a video, a documentary video that was shared. It's about 7.5 minutes. It also goes into more detail and shares a lot of what the mural movement is about.
Yes. Yeah, so we actually started in June 2020. It was right after George Floyd was killed. And at the time here in Chicago, we started to do a lot of protests. And at the same time, the city was shut down due to like COVID and protesting. So I own a gallery in Pilsen. It's called Vault Gallery. I also manage a lot of artists and muralists. And at that time when we were shut down, our business was shut down. All of our projects were shut down. So
are you an artist also?
As a kid, I was. I've had a passion for drawing and painting, but I'm more in like art business. Okay. I like to represent and manage artists and their projects. It's kind of a passion of mine. And I also like to sell artwork that I like. The hard part about having a gallery is that I always want to buy everything, but you can't do that.
What's the name of your gallery? Let's give it a shout out.
It's called Vault Gallery, and it's located in Pilsen. It's about 5 years old now.
How do you discover the artists that you show in the gallery, but also bring into the mural movement?
So I'm always looking on social media and looking at just different artists of who I want to display. I kind of just go with what I like. It's never about like status or how long they have been an artist or not. I always like to show things that represent who I am, my community, or have some type of impact with their art. So I'm usually looking for artists, or artists are coming to me to display in the gallery.
But you've been politically active before this. Obviously, you're very, very involved in your community. How long has it been that you've been like politically aware, or like really conscious of what's going on? Maybe you've lived in Chicago all your life?
Yes, I'm from Chicago. Okay. I lived in San Diego about 10 years of my life. I moved back here to start my first business. I've always been very woke about community things, but it really started right after George Floyd was killed when we were doing the protest. one of the business owners in Pilsen reached out to me and he asked if one of the artists I managed could come write Black Lives Matter on the board up in front of the store. So there was a lot of storefronts that had the boards up.
I want to save that story because it's in the video we're going to show.
Okay.
Actually, let's go to the video because then the video can present a lot regarding what kind of art the muralists present.
Yeah.
It shares a little bit more story about the organization. Then we come out of it, we can talk about other questions that the video doesn't cover, because I think it's really cool to see what the artists are presenting in our neighborhood. So let's run the video.
My name is Dalilah Martinez, and I'm the curator and founder of the Mural movement. The Mural movement started right after the George Floyd incident in which he was killed by police. At the time, there was a lot of protests here in Chicago, and a lot of the small businesses started to board up their storefronts. On June 2nd, a local business owner asked me, along with some artists, to come write the message Black Lives Matter on their storefront. I thought about an even better idea, that while we write that message, we also create an image that would display and support that message as well.
In my eyes, my friends have always been in the struggle with me. A lot of the artists in the Mural movement and Delilah have been friends of mine long before the Mural movement came into existence, and just seeing how natural they are at organizing in everything that they do all the time. I had already seen that in all my friends. They have such a power about them, right? That they're able to use their talent and their passion to inspire others and find a way to sustain themselves. And seeing everyone around me that had already been around me step up and be a part of everything, it just gave me so much more conviction in my role that I play in the movement, right?
I think it was Monday morning that the city of Chicago decided not to feed the children that attend CPS. Simone was like, all right, we're gonna go to the grocery store. She went and bought as much bread as she could, as many toppings, and we pulled up to Healthy Hood and we're like, okay, let's start bagging lunches.
The goal was what? 30 sandwiches, 60 sandwiches, peanut butter and jelly, and just be able to provide food. But that quickly turned into one of the most inspiring operations I think I've ever been a part of.
You know, for me, volunteering my time and my energy to create these murals and team up with other artists, it's a necessity. It's something that we felt we need to do. There's times where we get paid for projects. There's times brands reach out to us to do stuff. And this time it was kind of like, all right, this one's for the community, this one's for the people, charge it to the game. We don't want, we're not here to make profit off of it. We're here to save our lives, mentally and physically. So that's what we did. We really put out those messages, the Black and Brown unity ones, all the images with the I voted, even the census. That was just about using our artistic voice. Yeah, when I create work or when I create the murals, I just want people to feel empowerment or feel hope or feel that representation that you can reach the highest levels of your work and your voice of what you have to say, and also still be authentic to who you are.
At the time here in Chicago, there was a lot of rumors starting to begin that Black and Brown unities were not getting along. I felt that it was my duty to change that narrative. So I started talking to my friend Tubbs, of whom is an artist here in Chicago and is from Pilsen, and he came up with the idea that we should create a large mural that supports the message Black and Brown unity.
I would say the Black and Brown unity wall came to life, in the midst of protests, in the midst of a lot of turmoil within the United States. I'm an artist, so what's my form of protest, right? Like painting, getting out on the street, writing something, painting a mural. So I wanted to reach out to my friends, Black artists and brown artists, and give them this idea of let's come together on a wall in the midst of all this, this hate talk that's out there on social media, and let's paint a wall saying, that Black and Brown are united, and especially that brown people stand behind Black people in their struggle for equality.
It took about 3 to 4 days for the mural to be completed. On the night that it was completed, we were so excited. We felt really proud, and overnight, the mural was painted over.
So I was like, what? It just didn't process. We just did this yesterday. What do you mean? This whole viaduct that we painted is gone. It's just white. Like, nah, you're playing with me. I just couldn't believe it. I'm not gonna let it win. We're not gonna let hate win. So that's what Delilah really stepped in with the mural movement and was like, you know, we gotta continue this black and brown unity message throughout the city.
When we found out that our mural was painted over, it was very discouraging and painful. And with that pain, it turned into fuel for me to want to continue to organize murals. Along with the artist and myself, we decided to continue and start to raise funds to create more murals in black and brown communities here in Chicago.
History will show it. Art has always been such a major role in any revolution, in any movement, in any mobilization, in anything. And that's because it has a righteous role in the movement. Because it'll be when we look back at history, it'll be what shows us what happened. And I think the mural movement has continued to do that. And the reason why it's a movement is because it's a community of action. And action is the best form of resistance that you can ever use.
Your environment and what you see every day is so important. We need to find ways to beautify our neighborhoods without that being like an indication of gentrification or something that we don't deserve.
And I think also, if you think about the artists, that's like one part, but then you think about all of the people that the art will impact. You don't have to like go to a fancy museum to be a patron of the arts anymore. And I think the mural movement is really doing a good job of bringing art to people who will appreciate it, but also people who will be able to see themselves in it. Like, you don't typically see people that look like us or people in the art or even making the art. I think that's important because accessibility is like the name of this entire game, right? Like, what is accessible to us? You know, you can't be what you can't see, right? And I think this is a really good example that is probably gonna motivate plenty of Black, brown, and underrepresented artists for decades.
Dalilah Martinez, my sister in the struggle, a revolutionary woman. I try my hardest in my life to be a reflection of a servant of the people, of Jesus, right? And when I look at her, I see that. I see a reflection of God, of what it means to truly love people. To be outside of yourself.
None of this would be possible without Delilah.
Yeah.
Any of it.
Truly.
Any of it. So she deserves all the flowers.
All the things.
Currently, the mural movement is at 115 murals nationwide with plans to become a global initiative.
That's just incredible. There's so many questions to unpack from that. I often find as I drive across different neighborhoods and I see the murals, I mean, I didn't realize that there's an organization, there's infrastructure to support it in the mural movement, so that's fantastic. Clearly, what I sense when I drive past murals, it's like a wake-up call. It's like if I'm in my thoughts, it's like I see something that reminds me of something. What a wonderful way to share political messages, share activism. What I wonder about, though, when I watch that video, though, is it breaks my heart knowing how much work goes into a mural, and then that one artist said the next day it had been painted over. How long does it take for an artist to average out a mural in a location?
It always depends on like the size of it, but it could take from a week to 2 weeks.
So a week to 2 weeks, and wow.
And this is at a time that happened when the stores were closing early. We were broke. All the projects are shut down. We just like put our money together because it was a very large project. It's a viaduct. So it was very large. These artists that were part of this project, they get paid a lot of money for their time and their talent. And so everybody volunteered. We put our money together for this project. And then once we completed it, the next morning gone early.
So here's my question about that. Is there, I mean, I'm all for what you guys are doing, but is there a clearance procedure to be able to protect the art that's put up? What are the logistics surrounding a location you choose? Because where I see a lot of murals are in, sadly, blighted neighborhoods where it's like, that's where you need the reminder. Shit needs to change, right? So when you are working with an artist and you are choosing a location, how does your organization work to I don't know if you clear a location or what are the logistics?
So it depends. With that particular one, we had to ask the alderman. So if it's like a city property, which is usually like viaducts or anywhere where trains are, if it's city property, we have to ask the alderman or the alderwoman. If it's private property, we got to ask the owner. We don't just do murals without permission.
Right.
There are a lot of artists that do that, but then it gives you no protection at all because then it's going to be painted over.
Right.
But this one in particular, we did get permission from the city, from the alderman. The police
It's kind of like
knew.
a slap in the face to you. It's like, you got permission and we don't care. I mean, this is just like symptomatic of a lot of the problems in our city with our elected our representatives. I don't call them our leaders because they're not leading.
It was definitely a direct response to our message, and we felt so empowered, and we felt like we were using our voice.
What was the message of that mural?
It was a Black and brown unity, because at the time, the narrative started to shift between Black and brown communities that we weren't getting along. And I noticed this because my friends and I, we started a food pantry at Healthy Hood Chicago. And some of my friends from the South Side didn't want to come to Pilsen neighborhood. And I'm like, why? And they're like, well, right now, like, our peoples aren't really getting along. And I'm like, huh? What? That's awful. Like, and I felt like the narrative was shifting because it was meant to take our focus off what was happening with George Floyd.
Right.
So I'm like, no way can I allow this to happen. So let's just start doing things that bring in unity amongst our communities, because I feel like when Black and brown people come together and unite, we're very powerful.
Yes.
But, you know, I feel like sometimes people don't want us to be that powerful.
They want to divide you.
They want to divide us.
So here you have a great
yeah.
message of unity. You get the permission, and then so what? Did you ever get an explanation as to like who approved painting over it? Or
no, so it happened in the middle of the night. This is again during curfew when things were closed. So we finished around like 6 o'clock. I had an interview with Chicago Tribune the next morning at 7 a.m. And they called me and they were like, where's the mural at? And I'm like,
oh my God,
it's right there.
Delilah.
It's huge. It's like a large viaduct. You
Right.
cannot miss it. And it has the most powerful, beautiful images. And then they sent me a photo and I was like, oh my God. And basically we found the evidence because we searched the area, and basically someone took a big, large roller brush and painted over the whole entire thing.
So it wasn't city initiated. It was just some.
No, you could tell when it's in the city because it's like almost perfect. Like you
Yeah.
won't even notice.
It was just some
anything.
jackass who decided they wanted to like
spend their time, their heart, their money, past curfew, and paint it over it.
So locations are approved with the city or with private properties. It's such a welcome form of art as opposed to gang graffiti. I mean, gang graffiti you see as a blight, right? And it's about violence and it's about territory. And the mural movement is about sharing ideas, bringing people together, unifying people.
Right. It's about focusing on representation for the people in those communities, empowering them, making them feel beautiful, especially people of color. You know, I feel like sometimes we don't have a lot of people of color as like models or art or billboards. As a kid, I was very insecure because I never really got to see that. I was picked on because I had a darker skin. And I had a lot to do because TV or like billboards or models, I didn't really see people that looked like me. Yeah. So once we started to put up murals in specific areas and I noticed the impact it was making, especially with people of color, I said, well, that's my purpose, is to now put art in those areas to represent those people and make them feel beautiful and heard and noticed.
I tend to see more murals when I'm driving through the city on the south and west sides. I do see some on the north sides, but I see more on the south and west sides. How do you, I guess, what's the word, analyze where murals should go with your artists? Is there resistance from some neighborhoods or some aldermen? Or how, I guess I want to find out, like, where is their aversion? Because there shouldn't be. And maybe more people should know about that aversion. And
well, I will say there is a lot more resistance going north. And I noticed that with the mural that we were just talking about. See, most of the murals that we've done are in the South and West Side communities in Black and brown neighborhoods. We never have no beef with that.
Right.
As soon as we start to go a little north, it becomes a problem. I even get death threats. I get messages, horrible messages. Don't bring that trash in our neighborhood. Like, you're going to die. Like, I get a lot of threats.
Everybody's a critic.
So it's like, so
they don't realize it's art. I mean, and again, it's like, it's a welcome alternative
Yeah.
to the junk. I mean, especially in if you've got blank walls. I mean, I tend to see some in the underneath the overpasses on Lakeshore Drive, mostly in Uptown.
Yeah.
I see mural art, beautiful mural art.
Yeah.
Of course, that's also punctuated by the fact there are homeless people
Yeah.
sleeping under the mural art. It's like the mural art is meant to like focus on issues and problems and bringing people together and unifying people that we are marginalizing and not paying attention to. I especially notice that in the Uptown where some of the murals are on the north side that I see.
Yeah. Yeah. I tend to focus on communities that are underserved or in need, that have lack thereof because of funding or because the political leaders don't care about the areas. I go to areas that most people don't want to go to, where they feel like it's scary, it's dark, it's damp, it's unwelcoming. And I'll go to that area. I'm like, well, why is it like this? Oh yeah, the lighting's bad. There's no gardens. There's no playgrounds. There's no basketball courts. There's no art. There's nothing that represents the people here that makes them feel proud of their community.
Brightens their lives, gives them hope, gives them something to talk about with
I
each
tend
other.
to focus on those neighborhoods that need it. So that's our mission, is to focus on empowering those neighborhoods and those people.
So you find artists through social media. Do artists also come to you? Anybody watching the show who's an artist now can go to themuralmovement.org to find Delilah and the organization, which I believe we stated earlier, and I think also in the video, originated in Chicago, but you mentioned you're from San Diego. So this is a movement that has grown nationwide.
That's correct. I'm actually from Chicago, but I lived in San Diego part of my life. So we have some in San Diego and Phoenix, Milwaukee, Indiana. We've been to New York. So we have plans to go global as well. But we pretty much go where the people need us more. Wherever something's happening and it needs some attention, whether it's like for community, political, or like police brutality, we're going to go to where the people need us to go to use our voices.
Do you find which communities welcome you across the nation?
The most welcoming community are usually the South and West Side here in Chicago.
Okay.
So in particular, the South Side, we have Parkway Gardens, which is also known as O Block, where King Von was from. That is probably one of the most welcoming neighborhoods we've been to, but also one of the most controversial. Most people think that we should not be going there. It's scary to go there, but it's actually one of the most welcoming neighborhoods, and the residents show so much love to us. And the same thing on the West Side as well.
Do the artists who come to you, or whose art you discover, do they select the topics that they paint the murals around, or do you have a discussion based on a community, neighborhood, or a specific topic or issue that's facing a neighborhood that might be worth focusing on by virtue of looking at a mural?
Yeah, so what I do is I'll pick the artist that I feel like is fitting for the community. The artist and I will go to the community, and then we'll decide like what do we want to paint here? What is going to best help these people or empower the people? One of the cool things I like to do is I like to give the artist complete creative control, but we do study the area. We do see what the residents need, what they're like, and then we make sure that the mural is focused on representing that neighborhood.
So that's a fascinating component I hadn't thought about. Do you collaborate with the communities? Do you have like a public meeting, or how do you reach out to people in the community to kind of help support that process?
Well, I do throw a lot of community events where we provide resources. So it's just like we were doing COVID testing, HIV testing, passing out free food. We do bike giveaways, toy drives, turkey drives, back to school giveaways. So once we're in those neighborhoods doing that, we get to form a relationship with the residents, and we start to understand their needs and what they're like and what empowers them. And then we kind of focus on that. So we get to know the residents by throwing community events, and then we kind of move accordingly.
Let's shift to community leaders in politics, because we met you at Jamal Green's mayoral announcement rally.
Yes.
And obviously you were very moved by Mr. Green, as I think a lot of us are. We feel that he really represents the people's message.
Yeah.
We're going to talk a little bit about how your organization might align with certain local political leaders, or what you'd like. Are there those that are resistant to you as opposed to people like Mr. Green who have welcomed you and obviously share a message that aligns with a lot of what your artists are painting murals to address?
Well, one of the things is I never really had interest in being friends or hanging out with political leaders, because they're always telling us one thing in the beginning and doing another. How I view Jamal Green is based on his actions. Anytime I'm doing community events, he is showing up. So I don't really view him as like, oh, this is this politician I'm going to vote for because what he's telling me that his plans are, he's going to do it. It's more like his actions been showing me that he's going to do that. Yeah. I've got to know him by his actions way before I even thought knew he was going to run. I never even knew that was a thing.
He's boots on the ground. He's
in the ground with us.
He knows what's going on.
Yes.
To properly represent what people need, as opposed to those that, will routinely say, well, he's too young, he doesn't have any experience. And it's like, oh yeah? So all the old politicians who've got the experience, what's wrong? Why hasn't anything changed?
Right.
It's the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, and then marginalizing someone who's got new ideas, who's actually representing what's happening because he's there, in the community with people. So have you been welcomed by other civic or community leaders, for lack of a better word, politicians, aldermen? Do you see them recognizing the value of what the mural movement does, or are there those that don't? So what's the landscape like there?
We barely get noticed, but one of the aldermen from Pilsen, his name is Byron. He's amazing.
Byron Sigcho-Lopez. We're going to have him on the show soon.
Love him.
Awesome.
He, I could text him right now. He's available. I can invite him to my dog's birthday party or like a community event. He's going to show up. What's really cool about him is I'll be like, the street lights are out. He has them on in a couple days. Like, he's amazing. So he's another one that reminds me of like Jamal Green, and also one of his partners, Javier, that was just running for Senate. He's pretty cool. But like I said, I try not to get into the politics things because they're always tricking people. Yeah. But these are three men that I think of, people that I could go to as community leaders that are like boots on the ground. Like Jamal, he showed up to an event. I didn't even know this man, and he came with tons of stuff for kids and parents and like resources before I even knew his name. So I try to stay away from that because if I get tricked, I'm gonna be upset. But if it's, if they're like part of the community and they're in they're boots on the ground and grassroots leaders, then, I always appreciate that because that's very rare to me.
So people can find your organization at themuralmovement.org, and we're going to have that CG'd lower third throughout the show. What does your organization need to help support your artists? Because as I heard you mention earlier, obviously you do need to raise money. The artists are paid supplies. I mean, this is something that I think is also giving opportunities to fund artists. So what can people who are watching do to help support this movement?
Well, currently we're always accepting donations. Right now, one of our biggest projects we have going on is at Parkway Gardens. We're doing a basketball court build out, which is also being assisted by Chicago Bulls. They've been helping me. They're one of our biggest supporters. And the reason why I'm doing that is because in that area, there's 3,000 residents. 50% of them are under the age of 18. There's no playgrounds, no basketball courts, no art. We did a mural across the street, but they are in need of some beautifying. So we just finished our basketball court build out. Now I'm throwing a tournament for the residents, and we're raising funds for the whole entire tournament. And we got several projects. We also got something this Saturday on the west side. We're also doing a bike and back to school giveaway as well at Easy Money Fitness. So we're always doing a bunch of stuff. So you could just donate to themuralmovement.org.
There's more that I know your group is doing for the communities, and you can find out all about that at themuralmovement.org. Delilah, I want to thank you so much for joining me. I hope that people now who are driving across the city that see these murals understand where they're coming from, what work goes into it, what the logistics are, and why they're so important to get people to refocus on important social issues that, we all need to be paying attention to.
Right.
So to my viewers, please, thank you for joining us for this episode. You can find us on YouTube at Chicago Corner, where I broadcast on Fridays. We also broadcast Tuesdays, 7:30 p.m. live streams on YouTube. Join us there for more on the people and events and things happening throughout Chicago that make this the best city in the nation.
The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent. If you would like to be a guest on Chicago Corner, please email our host, Jerry, at chicagocorner.tv.
Get out, and don't come back until you've redeemed yourselves.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.